So let's give it a go. Welcome to, I think that's pretty much the first time there's something held like that, an interview in English with two members of the Duel Commander Rules Committee, which are Flavien and Florian. And yeah, I think the best thing is to just give it a quick introduction and you tell the listeners who you are, where you come from in terms of Magic, where are you playing, and maybe also interesting how you became a member of the Duel Commander Rules Committee.
So I guess I will start.
Yes.
I will.
Sure.
So I started Magic actually with Duel Commander. I was trying to play something competitive, but I wasn't really. I hadn't the card pool to play in like Legacy or Modern. And since me and my friends at the time were playing Commander in multiplayer, so it seemed like a good way to start competitive in a friendly environment. And so I started that way. And very soon I liked the format so much that I just played only that, and very fast I was hooked. And
Cool.
From that point I nearly did exclusively Duel Commander. I played quite a lot of Legacy, but I think that's all in really competitive Magic. And so that's how I started. I became very active on different forums, Discord and etc. And I think what caught the eyes of the committee was that I made a lot of content, like guides and stuff like that, to help with deck building, which is quite the thing I prefer in the format. And that caught the eyes of the committee, and they approached me saying, okay, so you produce some content, you have a good vision of the deck building possibilities in the format, so would you, if you are interested to work with us? And that's how it started.
Interesting.
I think that the main thing I really like in the format is deck building. Okay. I usually say I prefer deck building to playing most of the time, because the format is so vast and there is so much things unexplored, and that's what I like so much, and that's what hooked me in the format. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you play Legacy or Modern, you cannot have that much liberty, that much freedom, since there is pro gamers, there is people, which is a job actually, and there is not that much of a diversity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Did you play any other competitive singleton format before? Like something like
Legacy.
Highlander or something? No, because like a singleton format.
No singleton. I started with that.
Interesting. I personally don't know how popular Highlander was in France back in the days, but I know it was very popular in Germany. So
I think Duel Commander in France has been there for quite a time, so I think Highlander is quite confidential here compared to Duel Commander.
Yeah, it could be the case.
In France, it's kind of a big format in France. It's quite hard to have exact numbers of our players, but something which is, I think it's quite indicative, is that in nearly any shop, you'll have one something like an FNM, Friday Night Magic, but every day, and you have 1 day for Modern, 1 day for Legacy, 1 day for Duel Commander, nearly everywhere. It's when I was at a big tournament recently in Toulouse, they had the problem that actually there was nobody to play Modern, but a lot of people to play Duel Commander. So I think it's quite developed actually.
That's not actually a problem, but I do have the same impression. If we look at MTG Top 8 Daily, there are so many results posted from smaller events and bigger events, and most of them really come from France. So I can fairly believe that you have a very big Duel Commander community. Okay, thanks for that. Florian, how about you?
Yeah, well, funny part is I would say I'm the opposite of Flavien, because I would say I'm an MTG grinder. I've played almost all competitive formats, and Duel Commander is probably the most enjoyable format from my point of view, but it's a less competitive one. I was lucky enough to play some Pro Tours and top 8 some GPs. So Duel Commander is kind of break for me. But at one point, I think it was just before COVID or something like that. I was playing Duel Commander as a player, and I wanted to be invested in the format. I wanted to share my point of view, so I asked to become a member of the committee, the Duel Commander committee, and here I am.
Very good. Okay. So, an interesting or an important question for most viewers might be, what's your main way of engaging with the community if they want to reach out to you directly, if that's possible? So, Flavien, you already said you're very active on Discord. I think, Florian, that's
Yep.
true for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have to admit, it's mostly on French Discord.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably the easiest way to interact with me. But surprisingly, I have to interact with some people by Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like 1 year ago. 2 players just sent me some message, and we have chatted a little bit about the format and their force.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting and surprising, but it's one way to interact with me, I guess.
Yeah, I would expect people to contact you via Facebook, maybe. Also because like the announcements are still published on Facebook, not only on the website, which is a good thing, I think. So that might also be a way of interacting with you. At least I know that's possible to interact with you via Facebook.
Yeah, I think that's the two main ways actually, Facebook and Discord. Facebook is more, I think, institutional in the sense that you can contact the committee as a group to ask questions, and you'll have an answer, a more polished answer, I think, polished in the sense of detailed. But if you can also contact us by person, and in this case, Twitter for Trotte. We have some people that prefer Facebook, and as for me, I prefer Discord. And I usually answer people contacting me directly by messages on Discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from what I've heard, you're also engaging a lot with players on spot when you're attending any events. So you also
I absolutely do. That's quite of the things I do prefer in the format. It's the community aspect, and yes, a lot of people talk with us on spot, as you said. I try to do as much tournament as I can, but yeah,
we really think it's important to be part of those tournaments.
Yeah,
because it's it's more real. We don't want to be like our politics, like dictating rules from ivory tower or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's important to be
here.
Yeah,
you just want to represent the DCRC in real life.
No.
I think that's a good thing to do.
No, I was just saying, getting feedback on spot is quite interesting. It can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, but it's part of the job, I think, and it's quite fun. Recently, when you do a very big tournament, you'll have every time, I don't know, maybe something like 50-60% trying to talk with you and asking questions. It's part of the job, and it's very fun to do. But you realize when in this spot, you realize it means a lot to people, and it represents a lot of people actually.
Yeah.
Well, it's really less fun than that. Sometimes we win games by casting balance or they really can. It's like one of the worst feeling during the tournament because it's for us it's not that difficult, but for people it's difficult to interact with the player we are and not the
the member
we are.
Yeah.
To dissociate between player and person, and between player from on one side and committee member on the other side. That's always something that's part of the game also.
Yeah, because most of the time we just play tournaments because we love them. That's all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the end,
it's just a bonus to be here for the community.
Okay, Before we jump to the main part, I will just briefly explain. We have separated into 3 topics apart from the introduction. We will talk about the ban list itself. So we've collected a few questions from the overall community or from our community on the channel and via Discord and so on. So we will talk about some ban list questions. Then we will talk about the ban list philosophy, some more in-depth questions regarding your take on the format, and the last part will be the community engagement.
Yeah, I can start off with the ban list portion. Hi, everyone. This is the first time I'm speaking this episode of our breakdown, as it sort of is. So yeah, we've put together a couple of questions, curated them a little bit, and I think we've come up with a pretty good list to get a feel and maybe challenge some ideas. So the first question we have is, the partner rule change happened. For a long time, there was a lot of debate about what should be done with partners. The kind of initial strategy was to ban all the problematic ones. As the years went on since the release of that first partner set, the amount of problematic commanders turned out to be quite a bit larger than was originally banned. And then a new set of partners was released, and eventually, I guess, the amount of bans were overwhelming, so the mechanic itself was nerfed, which is, as far as I know, the first kind of big change that the big rules change that the Duel Commander committee makes to how Magic is played, where the Wizards official format has the command zone as it is, and we've changed it now. How are you feeling about the change? Is there any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yep. So I think it's gonna be quite a long answer. So I try to
We're
be
prepared for that.
precise and. Okay, so yeah, the partners rule was something the committee has to deal with for quite a long time, and we had this position from the start that we did not want to change the rules of the game, since we are not wizards, we are not changing specifically a keyword or something like that. And we always preferred to resort to individual card bans. What changed this point, what changed this process, is the release of Yoshimaru some time ago, because until then, partner was something of a keyword associated with specific extension set. So that was something that Wizard said, okay, every few years you have a new batch, and you'll have to deal with that, and maybe ban some, and etc., etc. When it was just like that, it was okay. We could just ban something. With the release of Yoshimaru, things change. Why? Because Yoshimaru said, okay, in any set that can be released, you will have maybe some kind of partners. In absolutely any set, not just multiplayer set, not just draft set, and not something you can anticipate. It's just something we will do. It's nearly evergreen. I know it's not evergreen, but the feeling was it's nearly an evergreen keyword. You'll have sometimes. And then the problem was deeper. We had to do something to prevent this. We had already partnered with and something like that, so we knew Wizard was going to push it even more. Don't forget that for Wizards, multiplayer is the main source of income, so they want to do something for their player base in this aspect. And so we decided to resolve this problem. And so this is the framework we work with. So we made that choice, and actually the feedback from the community was quite positive, because partner has been the subject of complaints quite a lot, actually. A lot of the messages we received was based on partners. There was a lot of people complaining about it. And so the feedback was nearly, I mean, I'm not sure I had any negative feedback personally. I mean, there may be some, of course, but most of the people who approached me to speak about it were happy. That's about the rule change. On the metagame impact, it had the effect of downgrading the number of partners we see in top 8. That's for sure. We do not see a lot of partners, and when we see them, it's mostly because the card itself is a good card, and it's a card we can play by itself. The other partner has mostly the role of giving more colors to the deck, which is actually what we wanted. We did want to downgrade.
Flavian point was we wanted to keep the partners card playable, but we had to handle the fact a player could start the game with 2 cards in the command zone. So it was our big debate. Well, at least it was the most existing one, I would say. But we find this solution, and as Flavien said, I didn't receive any bad complaints about this change as well. So I would say it was quite positive. Feedback has been good.
Okay, thanks for that. So,
one last point we didn't talk to. It's we were lucky enough to handle the background mechanic with this change. It wasn't expected, but the way background works is handled by this new rule. And personally, I would say it's quite a good news. What do you think about that?
That's very
Yeah,
interesting. Go
I
ahead.
mean, sorry. Okay, sorry.
I have answered a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to go on that way, since backgrounds are exactly that. I mean, it's something like partner. It's absolutely a partner without the name, and it's exactly the kind of things we were aiming for when we made this rule. Something like, okay, a new way to do partner and a new way to broke it. And okay, we
Fixed it.
We missed that one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I thought you were about to say you fixed it by that rule change. Because
fix is a good word. I was saying something like we missed something.
Yeah.
They missed something.
Yeah.
You know, advert. Sorry.
When I saw the background ability, it was quite interesting because at first I also thought, oh, we have this rule change. We don't have to be worried about anything. Nowadays,
exactly.
I heard a lot of voices that want the rule to be changed, since the background mechanic is way nerfed compared to the original partner mechanic, since you have your enchantment and you have the creature, and the enchantment is worthless without the creature.
That's true.
So yeah, that's true.
Just to ask the question once, maybe there aren't any plans of modifying this rule at some point?
Not right now.
Okay.
Clearly not right now. I think we actually think it's not a problem for backgrounds to be weak. I mean, without have a way right now to release a lot of sets, and they print absolutely a number of different legends, and so the number of commanders available is always going up. And so if 1 or 2 times a year there is something like that which is not really playable or just a bit underwhelming, it's not a problem. We prefer that to have 2 or 3 successive ban lists where we will be forced to ban a pair of backgrounds, a pair of new generals. So
okay,
it's something we're okay with.
Yeah, well, and maybe as partners, it's just the first set of backgrounds, and many more could be released in the future.
True, there could be more mechanics that enable some partnerish combination. That's right.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's sort of it's good on your side in terms of having to ban list cards, but on a brewer's side, it's a bit of a shame because you have like with the old partners, and like it is now. You used to be able to combine partners in a lot of different ways and kind of change the lists around that and have all this brew space. But now there's always going to be one partner that's the good one, and the other one that's the color giver. And this the same way with backgrounds. You can play the backgrounds as the color givers, but you have no kind of brew space to have these interesting combinations happen. But that's a trade-off for a more stable format in that sense.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah. So the next question is kind of has already been answered. Would have been, are you okay with the significant decrease in the presence of 2 cards in the command zone? You've both already said yes.
Yes, we are.
And I think that's, based on the reasoning you've given, that's totally reasonable. So the next question also applies to the partner rule, and it kind of speaks to the fact that before the partner rule change, you could sort of rely or build a stronger deck and kind of rely on the consistency of 2, maybe even off strategy partners in the command zone to carry you. And now that has been streamlined a bit more into having your one really good card in the command zone that has to be good. So the kind of range of, I'd say, playable decks that rely on single cards like Winter Orb or Balance or powerful cards in the deck, combo decks, has kind of decreased and tended more towards the commanders being the focus of the deck. Is that a trend that you're happy with?
I wouldn't say the metagame is shifting towards the commander-centric decks. I'm curious about, do you have any example of decks you want to illustrate this?
Well, recently you have cards like Shurikai, which has been banned, which as blue-white control was not a significant part of the meta. And then a good commander was printed for that archetype, and now it's a playable part of the meta. Or things like Aminatu, you play a lot of synergies with the commander and sort of just an Esper control deck.
Okay, sorry, I think I misunderstood you. So you mean we have a shift from more synergy-based decks to more good stuff decks? Is that it?
Yep, less synergy-based decks with the command zone excluded. So either you're playing a mid-range deck or you're playing super hyper focus on your commander.
Okay, I see your point. I think it depends on what you say when you say mid-range. It's a complex question. Magic is right now, the global tendencies in Magic is one of mid-range. A lot of cards printed are mid-range in their essence. I mean, something that does something and card advantage, or multiple lines of text, etc. So it's something we will have trouble fighting, that most of the cards printed nowadays are mid-range ones. I think one of the most obvious ways to see that are adventures cards from Eldraine. Cards like the Giant, the one which can be played as a shock, Brazen Borrowers. Those are cards that do every time 2 things at once. So there is a big tendency to play mid-range in nowadays Magic. So that part is something we cannot really fight. But wait, that's one thing. On the other side, I mean, I'm not sure decks tends to be more commander-centric. You spoke about Shurikai. Right now, a popular control deck is Tivit, and it's actually it's a pile of good cards. Yes, you're absolutely, but the general is quite irrelevant. I mean, it's a good card for the plan, and it's absolutely strong, but you could have something else with similar capacity.
Well, despite control decks, I would say your point of view is accurate. But my question would be, it was really different when people could play partners. I'm not sure about that. Like, it was the same thing because in 2022, court are really, really strong. And even even partners deck play kind of mid-range the gathering. So I don't really see the difference between before partners ban and now.
Yeah, so listening to the both of you and thinking about the question a little bit more, I think something that we didn't consider while writing this question is that since the time that, for example, I started playing the game and that the old partners before Thrasios and Tumnur and cards like that were banned, we had since then a lot of cards have been printed that are auto includes that just change the shape of the format overall. So I sort of agree with that a little more now, but the shape of the format has changed in that sense just because Wizards keeps printing these different cards, where back then decks like Alurin or something, they were playing basically no or a lot less mid-range slots than they'd be playing now, just because you kind of have to play an Oko and you have to play a Dranis Magistrate and things like that. So yeah.
What I think is the question was more intended to ask for, and not directly ask you, but ask the format for more synergistic decks if you want it like this. Because I do agree with Florian that partner decks most often enable just some 3 or 4 colored mid-range piles, but sometimes there were also like combo decks, again because either the command zone, most often Thrasios, or the color combination enabled it, but still, since the partner rule got changed, this one completely fell apart. And now we have to hope, so to say, for Wizards to print synergistic commanders again that are good enough to compete in the format, or they are broken and they have to be removed immediately.
It's interesting, but I would say there are some synergistic commanders right now in the metagames. Like
Yuri, for example.
I'm thinking about the White Fox.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough, yeah.
En français, it's Sveltpalt.
Light Pose.
Light Pose. Okay, yeah. Well, Light Pose is a synergistic deck, kind of Boggle deck. Wilson could be one as well, like green-white or green-blue version. The Bridge combo deck is kind of synergistic because it tends to assemble a combination of cards to win the game.
I agree.
There is also Karlov that I saw last weekend. I saw both Karlov deck and I was surprised about it. And the reasoning by the player was, if I play a 1/1 turn 1, then Karlov turn 2, then Karlov become 4/4 on turn 2, probably my Minsk and Boo opponents can't deal with this threat. And it was interesting. It's why it wasn't especially something new, but I think there are some synergistic deck in the metagame. I don't know if Aminatou Reanimator is played in Germany, but the deck is quite popular here, and Aminatou here is just a little bonus for the deck, But the deck, I would say the deck is synergistic.
I would not say that it completely decreased the amount of synergistic decks to 0. It's more like a personal feeling thing, and also we might be a bit biased because as you know, we experimented a hell lot with partner combinations, and so we were also searching for new funny things to do with certain partner combinations. But you're right, there are still synergistic decks available, either because Wizards is printing new commanders for that, like Will Lucas or Lightpose or something, or remaining ones from back in the days like Karlov.
Yeah, but I saw what you try to demonstrate, and I think it's accurate, but it's because of the power creep, not because of bans or unbans, I would say. It's really difficult to not include Teferi, Oko, or Take the Initiative in your deck, I would say.
I think we've covered some bases on that question. it's very open-ended and difficult to come to any conclusion because of this kind of wizard's aspect of just, well, they'll print whatever they'll print and we have to deal with it, and if it changes the format, then that's what it's gonna do. The next question is about an unban, a card that's been on the ban list that since I started playing, and it was explained to me as, well, this card is banned because of Carador. Loyal Retainers. It seems strange that it's still on the ban list, so have you revised your opinion on the card, or is there still a strong reason why it stays banned?
It was one of the topic of yesterday's stream, and I would say you're probably right. The card seems okay, but the main reason the card is still on the ban list is because when we are doing announcement, we are looking for some logic, some coherence. If we unban cards, it has to make a point, and it will not be the case with Loyal Retainer, but for sure it's a card that could be unbanned, for sure, I would say.
Okay,
Could you elaborate on what you mean with it has to make a point when a card is unbanned?
Well, if
Yeah,
during an announcement one card is banned and 2 or 3 cards are unbanned, it's really difficult to see the impact of those changes. And most of the time, unbans are experimental, or we are trying to see if the format is really improving with those changes. And by example, yesterday announcement was to fix the Minx problem. It wasn't about unbanning some cards to see its impacts on a new metagame.
So
Like it was each announcement has a purpose, I would say.
Okay, I think we can leave that there because we've got some questions in the ban list philosophy section.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
we'll talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So the point is that there's no point to unbanning loyal retainers, or you want to do it in an announcement where you can see the metagame impact.
Yeah, it could happen. There's a quick answer, and it could happen.
Okay, the next question here is, do you maybe have any other unbans you want to talk about? Any other cards that have been in consideration that might see play in the format soon, or
I will let Flavian answer because I think it's hard to answer if it's not our personal answer. Like we all have preferences, but most of the time there is conflict between us to talk about unbound. Like we know for sure there are some cards that could be unbanned. Loyal Retainers is one of them. Some of them will not be interesting for the format. By example, Baral. I'm not even sure it's really great to play against a huge pile of counterspell, bounce cards, and such a poor gameplay, but in terms of power level, the card would be fine. Well, I don't know if I can talk about my personal opinions about unbans.
if you wish to, you can do so.
Well,
want
I'm
to
probably the people in the group who wants to unban the most. By example, I think Tasigu could be fine in 2022 because when it was banned, like Go for the Trotte or Terminate were the best removal spell, and now like 2 mana removal isn't that great. But the problem with Tasigo is the way is paid with the commander tax. Like you could play it and replay it for 1 or 2 manas, and it could be problematic. On the other side, yeah, maybe Polymorph. Polymorph was banned in a time area where it was played with Baral and Emrakul. And actually, there are some red polymorph. I don't know if the deck with a blue polymorph would be a problem because, like, it's a combo deck with counterspell and it's really better than a red combo deck. But it could be something. I don't know. And you guys, do you have any thoughts about
I think
unbans?
thinking about polymorph, I think that's probably fine to unban, considering that I think there's a 5 and a 6 mana fell, and there is 3 red ones: Indomitable Creativity,
Yeah.
Transmogrify, and Reality Scramble. Reality Scramble kind of only sort of. And we see no play in that area, especially because putting anything except Emrakul in play is kind of suboptimal.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so for my part, maybe what I would look forward to is, and we can maybe go a bit deeper into that, or I mean, we've left the partner topic behind already, but it's kind of connected to that. That I think nowadays, in order to play a partner, the single card you play from your command zone has to be on a similar power level as the single commanders, and I think Akiri is a card that fulfills that requirement and is also interesting in terms of deck building. So that's, for example, a commander I would look forward to being unbanned.
It's interesting. I tend to agree, but I'm feeling alone in the group. Like most of the time, Arden is discussed.
I can also see that one. Yeah.
I think Akiri would be fine, but Balance could be a problematic card with it. And Akiri is still a 4-color decks who can play the best artifact cards. I don't know if it's too strong, but from my personal point of view, I think it could be interesting.
I think Arden is an interesting discussion point, especially because the card that it was paired with that made it so powerful, Ezio, is still on the ban list, which kind of, I think, and there's not much that you could pair Arden with that would make it good. Tilt has to read Deadly Relic. So, yeah.
Which leads to the next question. It's good.
The next question is
my favorite one for sure.
What's your point of view on free spells, especially Deadly Relic? So, if I can elaborate on that a little bit before you start answering. When those cards were spoiled, I was firmly of the opinion that Deadly Relic was the best of the bunch.
Ooh.
Because it's a proactive thing you can do. You play your commander, and before there are any extenuating circumstances, anything changes, you can cast your removal spell when you have priority. It's not a reactive spell. And you can get an instant mana advantage. You cast your commander for 3 or for 4, and you take your opponent's best creature out of the game. As opposed to the other spells, there are definitely the red spell definitely has the highest potential, where you basically cause double disadvantage to your opponent's card, where you kill their creature and have countered their removal, or the negate, which can also be great. But my evaluation is that Deadly Relic is the most powerful simply because it's the most versatile. And the way that the bans of those free spells have happened, it allows you to evaluate how free spells in general are handled. But I think a take on Deadly Relic is probably the best as an initial answer, I'd say.
Okay. I know you already read my thoughts about that, but my reasoning is, what do you prefer between Deadly Relic and Sword to Plowshare for 1 black mana? And I'm really convinced Sword to Plowshare for 1 black mana is way better than Deadly Relic because it's more versatile. You already said that, but it's mandatory to play your commander when you cast Deadly Relic for 0. And obviously, most of the, I don't know if it's most of the time, but yeah, well, most of the time you play your commander and your deadly relic is up. But in the case where you draw deadly relic after your commander is dead, it's like an really awful card. And moreover, deadly relic is only a creature removal, and it's an answer. Obviously, the card is really strong. I can't deny it, but it's only a creature removal, and it's most of the time it's an answer. Yeah, it could be played proactively for sure, but it's a creature removal and it's an answer. And in 2022, the really good or really great creature makes something when they are played or when they enter the battlefields, and a single removal doesn't handle them in a great way. And it's why I would say it's why we never I don't know if we could say never, but it's why we don't ban answer. So even if it's a 0 mana sword to Plowshare is printed, and by that I mean a real sword to Plowshare for 0 mana wouldn't be banned for sure, because it only target creature, and sometimes your opponents don't play any, or it's just a power creep.
How does that transfer to the arguments against the let's take the red free spell out of it, just the blue free spell?
Okay, as you said, the red one could be a 2-for-1, so it's easy to play, and it could be really devastating, because if I'm not wrong, it could target a counter spell as well. So it's really versatile.
But then it has to target the second counter spell, right?
Actually, I have no idea.
I think it can
Because
target itself, right?
Name. What is the name of the card?
Deflecting swat.
Deflecting swat, yes.
Deflecting swat. Okay, so you may choose new target for target spell or ability, and by doing that, the opponent counter spell can target deflecting swats.
Exactly.
So the red one is like kind of a counter spell for creatures, so for removal spell as well. And if we switch the target of a removal spell, it's a card advantage card, so it's probably too powerful. And the blue one is negates. It's for sure the best one on the set from my point of view, because it's not such a bad card when you have to pay it. It's like a force of negation, and negate is just a strong card by itself. So do you think the black one, like Deadly Relic, is better than the white one?
Absolutely. But you think negate is the most powerful of?
Well, it's just from my point of view of maybe control player, because it's a card who has the best variance. It's always useful, and maybe with the red one you just have to wait for a target. Like mental misstep has the same issue. Like you have mental misstep in hand, okay, well, but you have to wait the first one mana.
I agree that the red one has the highest potential, but also the most downside, because sometimes you just can't use it.
Yeah, and when you see a target of you for your spell, you just have to cast it no matter what.
Yep.
Not so interesting.
So the main point for me is that there's no variance to Deadly Relic.
Would you play a Sword to Plowshare for 1 black mana or Deadly Relic?
Probably both, depending on the CMC
Yeah, but
of the
you
command zone. We have to decide.
If the decision
you have to decide.
was binary, It's difficult. It depends on the mana cost of my commander. If my commander costs 4, then I'm playing the Swords to Plowshares every time. If my commander costs 2, then I'm playing the Deadly Rollick every time. And if my commander costs 3, then there's a little bit of debate between which one. Because that'll affect how often my commander's on the field and how often I'm going to be able to, gain value. And also the removal density of the deck outside of that. Because I want to maximize the amount of birds that I can kill on turn 1, which is impossible with a Deadly Rollick. But if I already have some amount of turn 1 removal, then I might play Deadly Rollick as a tempo advantage card.
I think it's an interesting debate. I'm for Sword to Plowshare, but I can see your point.
It also depends on the strategy of the deck. If a significant amount of life gain from a big swords is relevant, then I might choose. If I'm playing an aggro deck, then Deadly Rollick might be better.
I'm pretty convinced that a lot of great removal will be prints in the next year. We already got Eliminate or Unholy Hit, and both of them were exceptional. And I think in the next sets, the next one will be even better.
I think there is a large upside to an unconditional exile, though. Because those effects usually tend to cost 4. I think the closest that we have is Vraska's Contempt, because the exile is a significant portion of it in black.
Yeah, it's black. It's a little bit sad because of the color, but we got prismatic ending. Oh yeah, well, we are looking for a straight comparison.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a difficult debate. I think the amount of times when you look at kind of the play patterns around Deadly Rollick, or comparing it to a 1-mana Black Swords to Plowshares, you have this consideration that the opponent is, say you're playing against the deck that plays the 1-mana Swords to Plowshares and the Deadly Rollick. Depending on the color combination, when the opponent has 1 mana open, they are signaling they have something to do. And that if there's blue in the mix, that could be a Force Spike or a Spell Pierce or a Spell Snare or a Fatal Push.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hate this feeling. I understand that, but
and when you get blown out by a Deadly Rollick, you are losing to the opponent literally having one of their 99 in their hand right now without you having. There's no counterplay to that. If you decide to, if you have, say, an enchantment that targets one of your creatures, you can actively decide to not do it when the opponent has 1 mana open, because there's a large chance that they can do something about it and get a 2-for-1 on you. But when they have 0 mana open, you think, okay, well, they're tapped out.
You can
safe
play
in a
Reddit.
sense.
Yeah, sure.
So the distance between 0 mana and 1 mana is quite big there when you analyze a card like that, because play patterns around it change a lot.
Yeah, I have to admit, I really, really hate this feeling to play against Deadly Rollick, but I would say we can't ban answers because of the power level of the threats. But I tend to agree with you. It's a little bit frustrating.
We've just found a second category. So the first is you're banning cards because you don't like them, or the other way around. You do not ban the cards you like to play. Jokes aside.
The last question is another open-ended question.
Yeah.
To the ban list section, and it involves kind of banning based on the metagame. So when we collected these questions, it was after the last ban announcement, where Shorikai was banned and Grist wasn't. And under that Facebook post, and kind of in the questions that our community asked for this, there was a question of how do you decide to mediate something like that when you have, for example, the big French tournament that was played right before that ban list announcement, had, I think, 26 Shorikai and 30 Grist. So there was more Grist than Shorikais, and that has to sort of weigh into your decision. How do you mediate on these? We're banning a commander because it's strong in the metagame. Does that kind of factor into the decision a lot, or is it more based on how you interpret the individual power level of the decks, or how does the decision making look there?
Okay, I'll do this one. Actually, both of the things you mentioned are taken account of. So there is obviously a power level element, but there is also a metagame question. The power level element is probably the easier to answer, so I'll start with it. Shorikai was a problem because it was a card that did a lot of things, and it did a lot of things well. So it makes card advantage, it makes blockers, and it was very hard to remove. I'll go on that later. So it was a card that let blue-white decks play a very few card advantage tools, and so the deck could be loaded with answers and be extremely efficient on that. So that's on the power level part. But in the end, I must say it was something important, but not exactly the main point. The main point with Shorikai is its artifact status. The problem with Shorikai is if you go past the power level, the thing that you cannot really remove it easily with common tools played in a lot of decks. The format is a sideboard-less one. So we have a situation where if you want to answer correctly to a threat that is an artifact, you have to pack a lot of cards that could be absolutely useless in any other situation. If I say something like disenchant, it's obviously excessive, so you please don't do that. But that's some polarized cards. Cards very efficient in one specific thing, and that's poor gameplay because you cannot board them out. So you'll have a lot of games where it's just a dead card in hand, and a lot of games where it's absolutely destroyed your opponent. So it's absolutely not something we want to see in the format. Shorikai is the epitome of this. It's a card very powerful by itself and very hard to remove. Your comparison with Grist is very interesting because some points can be applied also to Grist, but not all. And one very important thing is that Grist is a card you can attack to remove it. So you can use the most basic form of interaction, which is the combat phase, to remove it. And it's also a planeswalker, which means it's a card you can remove by a lot of conventional removals, especially now that Wizard is printing a lot of cheap planeswalker removals. So the comparison is very interesting, but what really makes the difference, what really makes Shorikai something else, is its artifact status.
Okay. Yeah, so I also agree that there was no need to ban Grist there because decks play more answers to Planeswalkers, decks can attack those Planeswalker commanders, and Shorikai is the opposite in that sense. So and I think when you reach the kind of metagame percentage that the Shorikai deck was reaching, in addition to the other factors, there is grounds to ban a card like that. So say there's a commander that's been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Or what I'm thinking about now, maybe something like Aminatou, and
Mm-hmm.
we reach a state where people seem to enjoy Aminatou a lot, played a lot, and it ends up 3 Aminatou decks in top 8 basically every large and small or large and medium tournament for the next couple of months. Is that
Mm-hmm.
something that would concern you, that you'd think about, where you'd say, okay, we have a too high density of Aminatou, even though it's been legal for years and seems to be kind of a fair deck to play against, but we just have this huge influx of the deck. Is that something that would bring it up to ban consideration and maybe even to a ban?
That's a good question. I think maybe it could be the bridge we need to go on the Banlist philosophy question because it's clearly linked with that. Is that okay for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, with that we are directly going over to the ban list philosophy part. And the first question is connected to that, and I will elaborate shortly on that. Why do we ask that question? It's probably a German thing, since I started to be part of the committee as a regional coordinator for Germany, and we managed to introduce a lot of Highlander players to Duel Commander.
Mhm.
I've been asked numerous times what's the way to go for the Duel Commander Rules Committee, and I always kind of stumbled up on that question because I couldn't really give a clear answer. First, I didn't know. I would say these days I know better what the philosophy is, but, and that would be the second point of the question, in our opinion, it hasn't really been communicated. So I would say let's take the chance now, and maybe you can give us an insight on your philosophy of how to handle a Duel Commander.
I don't know if it's will ever be communicated like that, but I would say we want to promote interaction.
Yeah, there is two questions in your question, and I start with the general direction of the Banlist, and then I'll speak about if and how can we communicate about it. So, just like Trotte said, the main thing and what could actually be our main concern, I would say, is diversity and competitiveness. It's the two parts we think as the most important things. First, we want a format that is competitive. And competitive, it means skill rewarding. It means to reduce as much as possible the variance and do anything we can to promote competitive play. And more precisely, it also means, and that's something we work on, to promote diversity, because one of the main specifics, one of the main difference between Duel Commander and most of the other formats is its diversity. You can have a very, very high, a very, very large tier 1, a very large tier 2. You have a lot of rock decks playable, etc., etc., and that's something we absolutely want to maintain. Diversity, it means specifically a lot of different archetypes. So to answer a part of your question about Amina 2, the fact that there is, let's say, 3 Amina 2 in every top 8 is not a problem if the presence of Amina 2 does not forbid other decks to exist. It does not block other decks. For example, if you have something like Minsk and Boo recently, you cannot realistically play any other aggro deck. The Minsk and Boo may be something you can counter with a control deck, a combo deck, whatever, but you'll have no interest to play any other aggro deck, since Minsk and Boo will do exactly the same thing with a lot more power. And so the problem is not exactly the prevalence of those decks in top 8, it's more something of what a threat it is to the diversity of the metagame. So number is not the real, if I can answer in just one sentence. It's not a quantity problem, it's a quality problem. It means if it does suppress any archetype, it's something we want to fight.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to add, Florian?
I know it's one of your next question, but in the sense where interaction has to be promoted, we would like to avoid game who end
Dramatically.
on turn 2 or turn 3 without any interaction. Like playing solitaire is not wanted, and it's why most of the fast mana is actually banned.
And also, it's something we talk about when we spoke about Deadly Relic, but it's another point we keep in mind. It's we prefer every time we can act on threats more like act on answers. We do think that recent Magic printed a lot of very good threats, and that's a huge part of the mid-range tendency actually right now. And so, as much as we can, we prefer to destroy, to ban powerful threats while keeping powerful answers, because the game is more interactive this way and it favors competitiveness.
Okay, that's an interesting one. It connects to the deadly relic topic again. I got it. And Florian said that he would expect wizards to probably not print even more powerful answers, but equally powerful answers. I'm just thinking what's the reaction towards a state we could reach in which the answers are too powerful, like that there is some kind of imbalance, if that makes sense.
Now, I think answer will never be more powerful than threats, because if you play a creature who has enters the battlefield trigger, it's irrelevant to play removal spell on it.
Okay, if we're talking about answers, we're specifically talking about creature removal. I thought about it in a broader way.
What do you mean?
Like permission spells could be an answer as well, right?
Yeah, but we all know counter spells are the best interaction way, right?
Yeah, true. Just to define what we are meaning when we say answers.
Oh, okay. I expect more 2-mana counter spell in some ways, but they are all the same. And it's why I'm expecting more diverse abrupt decay-like spell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like probably a black one. The black one could be destroy target creature or destroy target enchantments for 2 mana.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something. Wizards already tried something in that direction, and this was the kind of card I was talking about when I mentioned interaction.
Yeah.
Because counterspell are not interesting. Like I'm not expecting 1 mana counterspell because of the Eternals format.
It depends on the design.
Except Flusterstorm, Spell Pierce, or whatever like this. Like if you put some restriction on the counterspell, but otherwise I think the artifact removal, enchantment removal could be way better in the next sets. We already got Abrade or Abrupt Decay or Eliminate, who targets and destroy Planeswalker. Yeah, it could
and recently be... Void Rend, for example, which also
and Void Rend is a perfect example.
Yeah. That's true. But I also had, in terms of counterspells, I think the recent addition to most decks was Wash Away, which is, for our format, a fine card. I think you don't like it that much, Florian. I think we had a debate about it already.
It's true. I think it's
overestimated.
Overestimated.
Yeah. Fair enough. But let's stick to the question and go into a bit of a different direction. So, to pick up on the second question, why hasn't this been communicated in an article yet? Is there any plan of somehow creating some kind of a red line for the community, or do you want to, let's say you just want to stay flexible and don't want to stick to something?
Yeah, you got it. If we draw a line, we have to respect it, and it could be problematic.
Okay.
Because we have no idea what wizards could bring us.
And what would be the problem of, like, let's say special circumstances demands special handling? So if there is something you need to deal with in a way you would usually not, it wouldn't be a big of a deal to just communicate it, right? That you step outside of the line, but you can explain why you do that.
Yeah, and it's already happened this year, right?
That's correct with the partner rule change, yeah.
But it's an exception, and it has to be treated like this.
Okay, so for the main 2 points, we keep in mind you prioritize diversity and competitiveness. These are the key aspects, and as far as I understood, nothing will change regarding these 2 key facts.
Yeah, That's something you you can bet on.
Okay,
This will be our main concept.
that's good. Let's go on to a different topic. So, Bazaar of Baghdad was banned in the last announcement. Okay, the last announcement was yesterday, so I'm talking about the May announcement.
Yep.
And it was the second card that was price, or the price of the card somehow influenced the ban. And our question is if there's some kind of a breakpoint or a threshold, like how expensive does a card has to be in order to be considered for being banned, mainly due to a financial aspect, because there are a few reserveless cards in our formats that are played apart from dual lands, something like Mode, Survival of the Fitness, Transmute Artifact, and many more that are relevant in some cases. And I remember there was it was not a debate, but the last time you had the English interview on Team Chronicles, there you invited Burgi, who's now the regional coordinator for Brazil, and he said that many players over there would like to play Tevesh Miara, I think it was back in the days, or some contamination decks, but they simply can't because the card is not affordable. That's probably not a financial aspect. Contamination is, compared to other reserve list cards, affordable, I would say. But is that also something you take into account when evaluating scarcity of cards?
Yes, scarcity is something, yes. Actually, the answer will be quite short, I think, but it's a problem we have in every format that's quite eternal. Every format, like Legacy, where cards are not printed anymore, will have this problem. So I cannot say we have a specific breaking point. It's more a combination of two things. One is obviously the price, if it's too high, and by price I mean also scarcity, if we can get it, if you can just play it physically. And the other thing is how breakable is the card. If a card is absolutely unfindable and too expensive, but it's a card nobody wants to play, and with a very low power level, it's not that much of a problem. But on the other side, something like Bazaar of Baghdad is a card that's just a ticking bomb waiting to explode. And at some point, we will have a situation like with Asmorano, where a deck is very powerful with it, and you will not be able to play it in any case, and if you want to be competitive. And so it rejoins my point on competitiveness. It's a problem if the best version of the deck is a very expensive one, and one you cannot play just because of the scarcity of the card. So it's not, to give a short answer, it's not specifically a price problem. It's more price, scarcity, and the potential of the card to be breakable, to be something you have to play in a competitive deck. But anyway, the problem of the price problem will be a huge problem for every Magic format similar to ours. So yeah.
Okay, maybe just another quick question that's often connected to that topic. What is the standpoint of the committee regarding proxies?
Proxies is something for tournament organizers. It's not something we want to talk about. It's something that rely on what every TO has to do. I mean, it's just not in our jurisdiction. Sorry.
Okay.
Just not our thing.
Not your job to take care about that.
Yep.
Yep.
We provide rules. This is some kind of a material problem, I think.
Okay.
Just a small follow-up to the price question. Have either of you considered what kind of price point something like duels would have to inflate to for you to say, well, these are prohibitively expensive? Say an Underground Sea, a revised one costs the same as a beta one now. That's either not going to happen or very far in the future, but like, currently I think a set of duel costs like 3,500-4,000 euros, which is a lot, and a lot of people can't.
I cannot give you a specific point. It's multiple factors. I cannot say a specific point. All I can hope is that since duels are very in demand for multiplayers, the wizards will at some point find a way to circumvent, to break their reprint policy. I don't know. But yeah, a specific price is something impossible to say. It depends on a lot of things. You mentioned scarcity, and typically duels are something very easy to get your hands on. Expensive, but not that scarce compared to Bazaar of Baghdad, which is very, very hard to get your hands on.
I would
Price.
sort of disagree, but that's I mean that's something that kind of comes down to like where you live.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
in Europe we have access to card market, and you can buy
Yeah, you're right.
your expensive cards there, and that's a trusted source.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
Okay. Another topic we thought about, or the next question kind of deals with combo decks in Duel Commander. So Modern is often named as a turn 4 format. And the question is if you have similar rules regarding combo decks, and how do you evaluate them? So there has been a big debate regarding Breach recently, or after the May announcement. And back in the days, there was Genesis Storm banned, which is a card that's still on the ban list for, I don't want to say for no reason from our point of view. These days,
I get your point.
It could be unleashed, so to say.
As for combos, there is a few rules, a few things we consider, but no hard rule. So what we consider is how possible is it to disrupt the combo, for example, if you have to have a specific interaction, or if it's something more available to every color and every archetype. Consider the speed of the combo, as you mentioned. And yes, turn 4 is something we like. To have a resilient, something stable that can kill on turn 4 is okay. If it can kill before turn 4, we like the combo to be not that stable. For example, Reanimator is something that can kill very early but very unstable and with a lot of ways to interact. Breach is something in between. It's usually not that fast but very hard to interact again. That's why the card is discussed, and yes, it's something we think about. And I think that's mostly it. Easiness with interaction, speed, and resilience. Yeah, the 3 points we consider when we speak about when you talk about combo decks.
Okay.
What is your personal point of view on combo deck who can kill on turn 2 or 3?
I think it's totally fine to exclude such decks from the format, because then again it lowers the diversity overall. And also, I mean, it depends on the combo deck, but some archetypes don't have enough time to finish the game in their favor simply due to the tools they have. Not necessarily to deal with this deck, but also just to win the game on their side.
I think, for example, the Breach deck is very unique in terms of its speed that it can win the game, because it can do it around a lot of... It's very resilient, but it needs a lot of setup. And the more setup you put into it, the worse the deck gets. When you start playing cards like Thought Scour and Mental Note and Tome Scour or something like that, to put enough cards in your graveyard in order to be able to combo off with Breach, then you have a much worse deck. But when you consider something like, for example, a banned combo as in like Lion's Eye Diamond and Auriok Salvages, where you can... Comboing turn 2 is difficult, but comboing turn 3 is certainly possible by just playing a Mana Dork on turn 1, and on turn 3 you have your Auriok Salvages and your Lion's Eye Diamond, and you go off. And you can... Painter Servant can go off on turn 3 simply by Grindstone turn 1, Painter Servant turn 2, and then on turn 3 you activate the Grindstone and the opponent has no more cards in their library. But those are combos that you can interact with. So there's a large range in there, and I definitely don't envy you for having to make those decisions of what you allow and what you don't allow. Overall, I think like the tendency of the format I don't quite like, because basically all of the fun combos can't be played, where the combo decks that do get played are basically just Breach and Painter as combo wins. But that also comes down to the fact that Thrasios has been removed, which means that infinite mana combos are a lot worse, and all the combos that do allow for that, to allow you to make infinite mana, need a commander outlet in order to be consistent enough. So I think there is quite a large underrepresentation of combo, as opposed to when I started playing the format where Allurin was always around. But there could always be cards printed that change that.
And just a fair mention, maybe the omnipresence of Allurin back in the days was not the healthiest one.
Yeah.
I've played the deck a lot. I enjoyed it a lot, but it was very powerful. If piloted correctly, you could score some great results all over again with it. I think these days it would be a bit different, since the card pool, like the interaction got better. That we got that already, and also Wizards started to print relevant abilities, sticked abilities to creatures, something like Drannith Magistrate, Opposition Agent, Hullbreacher, stuff like this, which would prevent you from searching libraries or playing your commander and drawing cards and whatsoever. So would be difficult or different these days, but yeah, I think it would be good, I guess, but you get my point. Let's jump on to another question regarding the topic of unbanning cards, actually, from the ban list. So most players often wonder, how does your process of re-evaluating cards looks like in general?
Yeah, but so about unbans, there is one main concern, and it's how does it help our objectives? Those I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
That means if we unban something, we want it to help on the competitiveness, and mostly we want it to help the diversity of the format. And this means quite some things. First, we tend to dislike unbanning cards that are not structural cards. By structural cards, I mean obviously command zones and cards you can easily tutor and base your plan on. Why is that? It's because since diversity is our main concern, we want, if we unban something, that it open up some new archetype or strengthens an archetype which is considered too weak for the moment. So when we unban something, it's mostly for that. For example, recently we tried unbanning Marath, since the Color Association Naya has no real commander available, and aggro combo was an archetype not very prevalent. So we wanted to push this to open up this new opportunity. When we did Zur back in the day, it was the same idea. And this led me to the main problem with unbanning cards. It's the outcome. So I said that diversity is a main concern, and the problem with unbanning something is you have mostly three outcomes. First, the best outcome possible, it does what we want to do, and the card open up a new archetype. So let's suppose Marath, it's a bit early to tell, but let's suppose Marath is very good, it's a good deck, it's just strong enough to not kill any other archetype, and not weak enough to just disappear. So that's the best outcome, the one we aim for. But there is also two outcomes. One is the deck is too strong. For example, Edric, back in the day when we tried to unban it, and it not just opens an archetype, it just kills any other archetype. You have to keep in mind that unbanning something means soft banning every card which is similar but just a bit weaker. For example, nowadays we have Raffine as a good tempo deck in the format. If we decide to unban Yuriko, for example, to open up more options in tempo decks, the risk is Yuriko will just be infinitely better than Raffine. So Raffine is actually soft banned. So we change nothing, we just swap one deck with another. And the third outcome is mostly a harmless one, but it does exist, is the card is unbanned and it does absolutely nothing. Zur, for example, was unbanned and the deck is absolutely not played. Nobody liked it. It seems to not be strong enough, so it's just useless. So these three outcomes have not the same chances to happen, but most of the time, in our experience, it's mostly useless or too strong. It's very hard to evaluate if a card will be just strong enough to open up opportunities and not too strong and kill some decks. So that's
totally agree
our main
on.
concern.
Yeah, I totally agree on, particularly on the very last point, that I think it's very complex to evaluate the influence of unbanning a commander or a single card, or its influence on the overall metagame and how that turns out. And in the same term, that's also why I think many players, and me included, sometimes would like to see a bit more of a proactive approach on that, to say, I mean, we can say like, okay, it's very complex and we have no idea what the outcome is looking like, but we can also say, because we don't know it, we can just be a bit more courageous and take that step forward, and we will try it, as we did with Edric, for example. And then we figured out, okay, it was a bad idea, because for some commanders, you just mentioned Yuriko, I would say it's kind of obvious why these cards are banned, and I wouldn't consider to bring them back. But for example, Florian mentioned Tazigor earlier, and I know a few people who would say it's crazy to unban Tazigor simply because of the delve ability and because it combines multiple factors. Sultai is a powerful color combination and whatsoever. And that leads me to the thought, I mean, it's probably a self-explanatory question, that you just want to have a more conservative approach on that in order to not steer up the metagame for 2 months and the tournaments that we played in that.
On the other side, we took risk unbanning Maras and 6-mana Teferi, and for now both decks don't exist. So it's a little bit sad.
Does that kind of change your thought process? I'm pretty sure that the recent power creep or the ongoing power creep is changing your view at the ban list overall, and also in regards to the command zone. It's, I mean, we're not talking about the 99 only, right? We also see very powerful command zones these days, as we had with Minsk, we have Rafine, Grist, and whatsoever. And Wizards is getting more and more creative in terms of making more cards or card type available in your command zone. We saw that with Florikai, we see it with Grist. Now we have Reality Chip, another artifact. It's even an equipment in your command zone, which is,
you're right,
from a diversity point, really cool. Sometimes it's problematic. In which way does it change your thought process or your view?
The power creep is just a data. It's something we have to take account, but it's something that's very hard to quantify. So it's still something like trial and errors, and I'm not sure if it does change drastically our way. So something I'd like to say before I forget about Marath specifically, and about your comment on being conservative, which is absolutely true. Marath is something interesting in the sense that I'm speaking from my own point of view here. I'm still not sure if Marath is too strong, and specifically if we were talking about diversity, maybe Marath is still something that can be too strong as an aggro deck because it kills other aggro decks. But it's something we cannot be really sure, since, as you said, the power creep is real. But it's also something we will not be able to decide on, since nobody plays it. And that's another thing that incites us to be conservative. It's that the format is so diverse that even if the deck is too strong, actually it may be some time before we realize it is. And the obvious example for that is with the Inala problem, where the deck was ready and available for a few years, and nobody saw it. And it's one player in China, if I'm not mistaken, that found the combo, built the deck, and from a little tournament with 10 players in China, it became the most powerful deck maybe ever in the format.
Yeah.
And every part of the deck was available for actually a few years.
Yeah, right.
So So it's another thing that leads us to be conservative is that it's sometimes, even if the card is too strong, it can be very hard to tell, and maybe something that will lay dormant for a few years before actually showing its power.
Yeah, I like that point. I have to agree here, because also another thing is that the reason why some cards are not banned is because not necessarily the power creep, but also because like they're getting drowned by new possible command zones printed, and people are just excited to play new stuff, no matter if it's good or competitive. Sometimes they're just cool cards and people want to build decks with. For example, the new Marduk gnome that does things with artifact. It's a cool card, and maybe at someday it will be really good. But yeah, I think we are at a point at which Wizards has the years before never printed that many legends in a given time frame. So yeah, it just changes circumstances.
I have a question that I'd like to ask. When you mentioned the kind of option number 3, and you talked about, or you said that it was kind of sad that 6 mana Teferi didn't see much play. And for me, I sort of feel the opposite. Is it not the kind of, if I was in your position, I think I'd feel some form of responsibility towards trying to keep cards that don't deserve to be on the ban list anymore off the ban list, and having a ban list that is actually as representative of the format as it can be, where when you look at a card on the ban list, you think, oh, this is a card that's banned because it's obviously too strong. And there are cards like the 6 mana Teferi or something like Genesis Storm, which were both cards that were banned as a part of a necessary meta adjustment, where the cards that kind of turned out to be the driving force behind the decks were later also banned. So with Teferi, I think High Tide was the card that ended up.
Yep.
If High Tide was unbanned, then Teferi would be a part of the meta again, and we'd be seeing quite a lot more Teferi play, I think. And if Uro was unbanned, then that would be in my opinion, a valid reason to keep Genesis Storm banned. But the reason that Genesis Storm ended, well, the only 2 decks that saw play with Genesis Storm were Uro and were Thrasios Tumna decks, and both of those decks are banned, and I don't think it's very likely that those are going to be unbanned. So keeping something like a turn 6 combo deck in the format, I don't see that. Like, is there not a kind of responsibility to manage the ban list in a way that you can release cards when the circumstances in which they got banned originally have changed?
I would say I totally understand your point of view, but it's not a point of view who's shared between us. Some of them think the same way as you, and some of them tend to not agree with you because they want more. I don't know. I have no idea, actually. Okay, some of us don't want to free those cards because they think unbanning a card should serve a purpose. I would say I'm not agree with this point, but I have to respect this point of view in the group, and it's really, really complicated to have the same point of view about any subject, even if we're 5. That's really complicated.
Okay.
The quick answer would be we know.
Okay.
We are aware about that. Yeah, it's really difficult for us to defend this global point of view.
Yeah, sure.
The group point of view,
I totally
because
get that.
I know Flavien shares this point of view with me, and it's a little bit exhausting sometimes. And actually, we don't want to lie.
Fair enough. One last point before we get into the last part of our interview, I just briefly want to mention is there was this incident players were very confused about when Wizards printed a commander that was basically better than one already on a ban list. We're talking about Ragavan versus Zergo. And my question would be, we know that you have your set schedule, so we have an update 6 times a year. And so there was an unplanned announcement in February, I guess it was, regarding the partner change. And we know that you are not a big fan of emergency bans or anything like that. But what is your opinion on that? Like, if Wizards is going to design cards in the future that are better, it's very unlikely that it happens again, I think. But it was very confusing to the player base why you wouldn't immediately exclude Ragavan from the format. And I think that's reasonable. Maybe you can elaborate shortly on that.
Some people wanted to bring back Zergo before the creation of Regaven. So it was an interesting period to at least to try red deck with one drop in command zone, even if it's way more powerful than Zergo. Besides that, it was an occasion to improve our communication and our work process, because as you said, a few months later there were unscheduled announcements. We've tried to listen to the community with the Regaven problem. I don't think a similar situation will come, and I hope so, but we never know. I understand the critique about this situation. Yeah, for sure. But at this point, we were not ready to make that move, I would say. I don't know if Flavien share my point of view.
So would you say these days you are a bit more flexible in these terms? I didn't have the information that it was planned to potentially bring back Zergo, so that's an interesting one. That's understandable why you would experiment with Ragavan.
Well, at least a part of the community asked the return of Zergo before Ragavan, so it was like a test.
Yeah, okay.
But we have to be rational, and obviously we knew that Ragavan would be like really, really powerful, even if not broken. But it was complicated in our group, and we have to admit the partner change was one of the most intense debates.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
So I don't know how you witness it from the inside, but it was really, really complicated to take this decision as quickly. It was really difficult to
get to the consensus.
To get to the consensus as a team.
I mean, I do know, but for the community, it was more or less a fast decision that was made since Yoshi was printed. I do know that there were a lot of debates and a lot of time went into making this decision. That's for sure.
Maybe Ming Senbu is kind of Ragavan number 2. I don't know if it's right, but our decision was fast and faster than usual, I would say.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. So let's go over to the last part, and I will pass the ball back to Samuel.
Yes, so I think part of these questions have already been covered in the beginning. And the first question is, what are the best places for members of the community to give you guys feedback? You've said Discord, you've said on Facebook, you get kind of like a qualified response that everyone agrees to. Yeah, are there any other avenues or anything that, if someone thinks I'd like to give some constructive criticism or something like that, where do you think that the best place to submit that at is?
I think that would be the Facebook page, as we mentioned earlier. The direct discussion, either directly to somebody with Discord or via using the Facebook page. I think that would be best.
Okay. The next question is there any structured process to becoming an advisor or a regional coordinator or a core member? How do you decide?
There is no specific process because it's mostly between everything. How can I say? For example, the last people that joined us, for example, Bergie, was a spontaneous application. And that's the way most of the people are recruited, direct application, or on the other side, some kind of scouting if somebody is recognized as important people for their community, creating content for their community, things like that. The thing is, the committee, especially the consultant, we try to have different profiles, from people recognized as community leaders to people creating content for the people, or specific good players for the tactical insight. So there is no specific profile we're searching for, and there is no specific process. Francisisme classique. No specific process, I would say.
Good.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so if someone wanted to take part in these discussions, or to be one of the deciding members, someone who's been there for a long time or someone who's very passionate, who has a lot of time to offer, what would you recommend to anyone like that in order for them to kind of move forward?
If someone is really motivated, the person just have to send an application, like just a message. It would be fine.
Where do they send that to?
Yeah, on Facebook,
Facebook.
or Discord.
Yeah, on the main page.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. And the last question is, are there any ways that you specifically would like people to get more involved in the format? For example, are there any avenues, anything that you've tried to kind of communicate to people on, or anything you've tried to establish that didn't get out there, or something like that?
My main advice, the main thing I want to say is build a lot of decks, because it's a community format, and a lot of the decks that are played by a small number of opinion leaders. When you see everybody does that, me included, when you see on MTG Top 8 some new deck with original ideas, and you're like, oh, I didn't thought about that, and there is a lot, and I insist, a lot of unbuilded generals with a lot of different commanders that nobody tried to build. As we said earlier, there is a lot of new card printed, etc. So one of the main things you can do for the format is just build new decks and try to
innovate,
create new things.
Yeah,
innovate. I was searching for this.
Yeah.
To innovate. I think that's very likely one of the things that drives the most of the format.
I think we would agree to that, definitely.
Yeah, and that's definitely a way to have fun in the format too.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most fulfilling ways to play Magic, is to be the author of a deck.
Yeah. From my point
Absolutely,
of view,
yeah.
Duel Commander is just a constructed cube. That's all.
Yeah.
Enough.
Good one.
Lot of
Yeah.
people.
And I think with that, we're at the end of our questions.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. I have to say a big thank you to you guys taking the time.
Well, thanks for the invite, and thanks for your community. It's the most important.
And thanks for keeping up with our broken English.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity to present your thoughts and ideas to the non-French speaking community, and maybe this was not the last time that we have had you here.
I hope so.
On air.
I hope so.
I do hope so as well. Maybe we can do it a regular thingy. I will leave it here because you're probably occupied enough already. Good. So
from me too, I think that was very enlightening. There's always, when you're in the in the, I'll say, the consuming position where I just look at the ban announcements and I have thoughts and we discuss them and think about them, but there's always aspects that are difficult to kind of fathom when you're not in the position.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And to get some insights on certain points or more general points really helps in understanding the whole process.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last words from you guys? Otherwise,
I want one more question.
Okay,
outside
let's
of the interview.
Sure.
What are you guys' opinions on balance?
We can
because-
make a cut and then we can debate about balance.
Oh, I thought we had made a cut.
Oh, not already. But
Okay, never mind then.
so
Never mind then.
that's like for part 2, guys. We will we will start part 2 with what Florian
teasing.
For the Patreon only episode.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for tuning in and hear you next time. Bye bye.
See you next time. Bye.